Okay, so this is going to be a little bit different than most of my videos because there are basically three big things that I want to talk about that are kind of all over the map. The first is it looks like the Ukrainians have taken back large portions of Toretsk, and I'll show you this in just a moment. Second is protests have broken out across the United States in various places, and I'll show you some of these. A pro-Ukraine protest, and it's amplified. So like what Donald Trump actually did in the Oval Office with Zelenskyy is kind of helping him, and I'll explain what that means. And then third, if you want to get involved, if you're sitting on the sidelines and you're frustrated and you have some kind of skills that you could donate to Ukraine, even virtually, I'll show you how to do that before we're done. So, okay, let's get started. It is Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. 1,110 Russians off the battlefield, 8 tanks, 25 armored fighting vehicles, 117 vehicles and fuel tanks. Again, there's this high correlation between the number of vehicles and fuel tanks and the low numbers here. And part of that is, and again, this was verified to me yesterday. I can't cite it because it was through a conversation, but verified that that's drone activity is what's causing that. Now, let's look at this. Per cross direction, 26 assaults. That gels a low number of assaults there with the low number of assaults in per cross and a low number of casualties here. It's a really interesting thing. But here's what's also happened. Ukraine retakes Toretsk, and just weeks after Russians had declared victory there and had pushed the Ukrainians out, well, Ukrainian forces are advancing on key front lines, notably Toretsk, where they push back Russian troops soon after the Kremlin claimed victory in the strategic Donetsk town. Now, it doesn't look like all of Toretsk necessarily, but look at this. Ukrainian defenders are advancing to cut off a sizable group of Russian invaders in Toretsk, Donetsk region. On this map, areas recently taken under Ukrainian control are in yellow, and areas under Russian control are in red. So like they have, pretty much encircled. All they have to do is cut off here and they'll have bagged these Russians here. And it's a really interesting thing to watch. Didn't see that coming. The Ukrainian armed forces are actively advancing in Toretsk, reclaiming key positions. Fighting continues in the city center, and the enemy is losing control. There are reports of complete encirclement of Russian occupiers in several areas. So that's kind of good news. And now it's not all of Toretsk, but still, that's some good pushback. Okay. Meanwhile, out of 79 launched the Shahed drones, 63 were shot down, 16 were lost in location. 79 is a big difference from 100-something or 200-something over the last couple days, as I showed you yesterday. On the evening of March 1st, Russian drones struck an apartment building in Zaporizhia, causing a fire. So bad things are still happening. And Garry Kasparov talks about, like, hey, this thing that happened Friday, yeah, the war is still going on. Time to shake off yesterday's White House debacle. Ukrainians, and again, this was yesterday that he wrote this, so that would have been Friday's debacle. Ukraine's defenders don't get to take a day off to talk politics. Ukrainian civilians don't get a day off from Iranian drones and Russian missiles crashing into their houses and hospitals. Now more than ever, Slava Ukraini. That's a good point. Like, this kind of thing still keeps happening. Okay. Andrew Perpetua posted this yesterday, and I thought, I hope he's right. I believe Trump is going to receive significant pushback from within the U.S., and he'll be forced, perhaps against his will, to change course. Now, I was putting this out yesterday, day before yesterday. Here's how to write President Trump. This is a 2-minute video. Shows you how to do it. Very easy. How to fill in a form. Kind of thing to say. Right. Okay. So now I recognize that not all of you are American citizens, but if you're an American citizen, and I went and I thanked everyone that I could see at the time that I wrote this, I went through and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. There were well over 100 doing that. And if you can take this and, repost this somewhere, if you're in these kind of circles, this would be great. So it can travel and it can take on some legs. Now, people would say, either I wrote, or alternatively, they'd say, I'm not an American. Okay, you're not an American. I get that. Or alternatively, they'd say, yeah, like Trump's going to read this. No, a staffer's going to read this, but it doesn't even matter what you say, because you can speak in caveman speak. You can say, me want you support Ukraine. They'll be like, okay, another one for Ukraine. Okay, another one for Ukraine, another one for you. That's all. This isn't about being eloquent. It's a numbers game. So the more people that register, and the same thing with your senators and your congressmen. The more people that register support for Ukraine, the more they're going. Well, the polling here is showing us that they're really supporting this. Okay. Now, this was really interesting. Around 500 Vermonters came out to Waitsfield, Vermont this morning to protest Vice President Vance, who is spending the weekend at the Sugarbush Ski Resort. So they're lining the streets supporting Ukraine. J.D. Vance was literally barraged by protesters when he arrived at his vacation in Vermont today. People are livid about how he treated Zelenskyy. J.D. Vance is apparently skiing in Vermont this weekend, and the locals aren't having it. Thousands have lined the streets in protests. Okay, so here's how CNN was covering this. CNN is covering hundreds of protesters who line the streets and the road. Go ski in Russia, traitor. Okay, here's what we're hearing.
However, Vice President J.D. Vance is vacationing in a remote ski town in Vermont, and we did see some protests today lining the streets, including one protester who held a sign that said, "Go ski in Russia, traitor." So very notable there. But remember that back...
Okay, now it is Vermont, and they're thinking, okay, Vermonters tend to be more on the liberal side of the spectrum, but they're missing the plot here. Okay, here is Fox News covering the same thing.
And the family for Vice President J.D. Vance and his family following yesterday's fiasco there in the Oval Office with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. There's some new video now we have showing the vice president being greeted by protesters holding anti-Vance, pro-Ukraine signs as he makes his way there to Vermont for a ski resort vacation. More protesters met the Vance family outside of the resort, and the family ultimately had to move to an undisclosed location.
Now, I'm not advocating that you chase the VP somewhere, but he needs to be aware that this is the sentiment, and I don't think he is aware. I think so. Part of I was talking about this in my power and influence class the other day. When you have power, when you think that when you're primed for power, your objectivity is diminished. You don't see things clearly, and clearly Trump and Vance think that the way that they talked to Zelenskyy was a good thing, and they need to understand that no, it wasn't. And the only people that think it was a good thing are other Republicans. The rest of the country is having an alert. The rest of the world, I mean, not just the U.S., but in Europe, they're having this allergic reaction to the way that Trump and Vance talked to Zelenskyy. So they need to understand that. But they went on Fox News, unfortunately, to continue to say, well, you know how the Democrats are about their protest. It's not about Democrats. It's about people that are upset about the way that he handled Zelenskyy, Republican, Democrat, Independent. And so even on Fox News, they were missing that. Now here's protests in New York City. People attended these rallies, and here you are in Times Square. Like there's a lot of this kind of thing going on now. Okay, Democratic congressman at Hofstra University. So, okay, a Democrat at a college. Okay, yeah, but this congressional district went +5 for Trump in the last election. It went up 5 points for Trump. And here's what he had to say.
Listen, everybody's freaking out. Everybody's like, I'm Mr. Like, let's work together. Let's try and find common ground. And what happened in the White House yesterday, I was so pissed off.
Yeah. But look at all the gray hair in there, too. That's not just the college crowd. That's a lot of just regular citizens who it was +5 for Trump, up 5 points for Trump in the last election. Okay. When you lost the Mail in Britain, the Mail's headline was, "Now Stop the State Visit for Bully Trump." Okay, so the way that he treated him came across the optics. So I said this yesterday in this. I was talking in this live stream about what happened yesterday and just answering every question that people gave me that I could answer in about an hour. And I was talking like it's like a Rorschach test. I mean, it really is. It's like the way that you see it is like the way that you come to it If you already are predisposed to see it one way, then you'll see it that way. Now, here's Senator Cruz talking about it. He kind of gets it right, but then he loses the plot too. Here's
Keeps
Senator
doubling
Cruz.
down. I think there's a very good
for those of you who don't know, Senator Cruz is a Republican from Texas.
Possibility, as I said, that Zelenskyy does not politically survive this, and within days that he's out of office. I also think, look, it's not complicated that President.
So he was saying that he doesn't think Zelenskyy is going to survive how the Oval Office thing was handled. I think it's done exactly the opposite. I think it's made Zelenskyy bigger and more important, and people are rallying around him because they're seeing how he was treated.
President Trump campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine. This was not a mystery. Every voter who went and voted in November understood that if you elect the Democrats, the Ukraine war goes on and on and on and on, and we keep pouring billions into it forever. And every voter understood if you vote for Donald Trump, this war is going to come to an end. Now, I think it is important. This is something I have urged President Trump repeatedly. I think it's important that this war come to an end in a way that is a clear and unmistakable loss for Russia, a loss for Putin.
Okay, so that's good so far, but then he kind of goes off the rails a little bit. But that is good. It needs to end in a way that is a loss for Russia, so that Russia doesn't do this again.
I think Russia losing benefits the national security interest of the United States.
Yeah.
I got to say, by the way, Zelensky's performance was so bad that I think it not only harmed his own country, but I think it harmed world peace. Mm. And that's...
So he's missing it, and that's not the way that like if you look at what Europe's reaction is, and that's what we'll look at 3 big stories tonight, that's not how they're reacting to it.
I cannot imagine the plane flight back right now.
No, neither can I.
Look, you and I assume Zelensky's in the air right now, flying back. What I don't know...
What is he landing to?
Are his advisors sitting there blowing smoke at him? Oh, wonderful job, Mr. President. You showed him.
It certainly won't be the ambassador, because she was like this.
Yeah, so they're not getting it. It's really fascinating to me. So I watched the thing yesterday on Friday. I did video about it, and then I watched Fox News and CNN. And did I watch any MSNBC? Well, at least Fox News and CNN in a meeting comparing notes. And Fox News was just like talking these talking points. I'm like, were you watching what I was talking about? Because that's not how that went down. And this isn't to disparage Fox News. This is just saying, like, if you see something through one filter, you're missing something completely. And they're not getting it yet. Okay, Anton Gershchenko is talking about this. This is an important request for me. We all live in our own information bubbles. That's astute. That is true. We all do that. And our view of the world is inevitably subjective. This isn't true just for the average person. It applies to experts as well. That's why it's important to consider all perspectives, analyze different reactions, then look at every side of an issue. I'd be incredibly grateful if you, my followers, could share what you're seeing in your countries and your information spaces. And I'm asking you to repeat that, to do the same thing. I think what's happened is that the world's having an allergic reaction to how Trump and Vance dealt with Zelenskyy. The message that you would have gotten out of Fox News is, how could he have talked like that? But I'm asking, like, I talked about this yesterday. That's how I approached this in my live stream. I said, okay, what am I missing? This is how I see it, but what am I missing? How are other people framing it? And generally speaking, like, you asked some really good questions and we got to cover that. Okay, so remember this video from the Munich Security Conference? Where did this Lindsey Graham go? Okay, so this was Lindsey Graham at Munich.
I want to tell you and your people, you're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass. And I'm very proud to have you as our ally. And I don't know if we can ever do
now, this is after the Friday Oval. Like, I don't know how Lindsey is not seeing this.
With Zelenskyy again. I think most Americans saw a guy that they would not want to go in business with.
What? Like, I just don't get it, because he asked, and the real turning point was J.D. Vance's question and him asking, what do you mean by diplomacy? And he wasn't asking me, like, what do you mean by diplomacy? He wasn't doing that. He was just asking, well, what do you mean? Like, Putin's violated us 25 times. What do you mean? And the way that they treated him just wasn't appropriate. Even Girkin, the T, I'm not going to say the word for Google's filters. Girkin wrote a letter from a Russian prison. In it, he claimed that Trump's attempt to humiliate Zelenskyy, but ultimately he humiliated himself instead. Now, I don't side with Girkin on hardly anything, but he's right that this kind of backfired on Trump, I think. Girkin also noted that Zelensky's support in the U.S. and Europe is quite strong, while Trump lacks any real leverage. So this is what he said. Overall, I disagree with the assessment of this meeting and its outcomes as presented by our media. In our television, they claimed that Trump and Vance harshly humiliated Zelenskyy. Okay, so first thing that you need to understand is that Russian media is also taking the line that Trump and Vance have humiliated Zelenskyy. I don't think that's it. However, I believe that it was Zelenskyy who utterly humiliated Trump. Now, he didn't do it by talking back. He did it by simply being the victim. Like, just, I don't mean playing a victim. I mean just literally just being like, what did I say here? I'm trying to explain, and the world saw how lopsided that was. Humiliated Trump and Vance in front of the Central American media of all America, when Trump, and his characteristically boorish cowboy manner, tried. It's funny him talking about a cowboy from New York. It's just, as an American, I find that odd. Tried to demean Zelenskyy in the Oval Office of the White House. He ended up with the exact opposite result. Not only did Zelenskyy refuse to the deal that Trump already considered as good as in his pocket. That's a good point. A deal that he could have presented to his voters and all U.S. citizens as his first major foreign policy success. But he effectively turned the tables. In fact, Trump faced direct and demonstrative defiance from someone he regarded as best a servant. And he goes on and talks about how Zelenskyy demonstrated that the elites in Europe and the U.S. supporting him are strong enough to oppose Trump, at least on this level. Of course, Donald will never forgive Zelenskyy, but what can he do about it? And the answer is not much. And the Europeans are stepping up. Today, the Europeans are having the meeting led by Keir Starmer. Okay, so let's look at what you can do about this now. This is really interesting. Czech crowdfunding initiative has successfully raised funds for 20,500 donors to supply a Sikorsky Black Hawk. I'm not asking you to donate like money. That's not it. The Black Hawk will be turned over to Ukraine's GUR, Special Operations Aviation Branch, which already operates this type. Now, it also goes on and says this: record donations reportedly started to come in after Friday. Like, you see what the connection here? Like, people are ticked about what would just happen. Now, what can you do? And I'm not asking you to donate money. Okay. You know how I have this fascination with drones, and we talk about this regularly. Well, I was talking to a guy from Technology United for Ukraine. That's this. And this is their symbol on YouTube. If you look it up, it's at Technology United for Ukraine as one word. And if you look it up on YouTube, Technology Ukraine. Now, if you're an engineer, you'll recognize why there's a skunk here. And if you're paying attention and you recognize the body demeanor of this guy with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, maybe saying Slava Ukraini before bad things happen to him, that's their symbol. Now, if you go online and just look up technologyforukraine.com, this is the website, and you can look all about it. If you have skills as an engineer or something in some kind of data something, and you're retired and you have free time on your hands and you can assist Ukrainians even virtually, you don't have to go there, and you have the time and you're interested in that, well, you fill out this form. This form will ask you for your full name, your email, your phone number, your location, and you can be as vague as you want. You can just say America or wherever you're from. Occupation, like if you're an engineer or you have some kind of skills that you want to bring to the table. I know a number of you have sent me messages saying, hey, look, I have this idea. Who can I get this to? Look, this is the place. Put in here, I am a retired electrical engineer. I'm a retired this. I'm a retired that. Now, I say retired because most of you are older than me if you're watching this. That's just my demographics. And mention me in the process, because I'm trying to create some kind of group that can work towards something. So Professor Gerdes sent me, I'm a retired engineer, or I have these kind of skills or whatever. Doesn't have to be engineering, but we want to look at something. And these guys are plugged into the Ukrainian military, where they have been working with a number of different groups and helping them exponentially move their technological prowess to the point where it's really moved farther and faster than it would have otherwise. Okay, so if that's interesting, I know a number of you, almost 100 of you yesterday said, I'm interested when I revealed this. And I'm going to do a second video, a very short video about this later on, explaining the same process. Okay, we'll wrap up with this. On this day, Darth Putin says, on this day in 1992, the Transnistria War kicked off. Pro-Russian forces were forced to have a ceasefire to stop NATO continuing its move eastward that hadn't started yet. We've occupied a part of Moldova ever since. Your inaction was noted. And then he goes on, says, by the end of 2002, all Russian soldiers were supposed to have been removed. They have not been. So you can believe our promises about Ukraine now. Here it is. In November 1999, members of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe convened in Istanbul. One of the most noteworthy provisions of the document signed by the heads of state at the summit was the commitment by the Russian Federation to withdraw its troops and military equipment from Moldova and Georgia by 31 December 2002. And they're still there. And so there's a reason why Zelenskyy keeps asking for, what are the security guarantees if I sign this document? All right, my friends, that's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.